It was a rainy afternoon in the city, one of those days where the gray clouds hang low and the streets glisten with reflections of neon signs and headlights. The wind carried a chill, and the raindrops pelted down on everyone who dared to walk without an umbrella. Among those people was a little girl, not more than 8 years old, carrying a small backpack over her shoulders and clutching her mother's worn-out purse. Her shoes were soaked and her hair clung to her face, but she didn't complain. She had a purpose, even if she didn't fully understand it herself. She walked carefully along the curb, trying not to slip on the wet pavement. Her eyes scanned the street, observing the cars rushing by, the occasional pedestrian hurrying for cover, and the way the rain turned puddles into tiny mirrors. As she reached a stoplight, her gaze fell on a black limousine stopped at the corner. It looked out of place in the midst of the modest cars and taxis around it. The limo was polished to a shine, and through the tinted windows she could see a man sitting alone in the back seat. He was dressed sharply in a suit that screamed success, but there was something in his posture that caught her attention. He wasn't looking outside at the rain or the city. He was staring down at his hands, lost in thought, as if he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. The little girl hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should approach, but curiosity and something deeper, a strange sense of knowing, pushed her forward. She took a few careful steps and stopped right beside the limo, looking at him through the glass. He noticed her immediately. He straightened up a little as if surprised by her presence and gave a polite nod. She returned the nod with the seriousness of someone delivering an important message. Without thinking too much, she spoke. Her voice was soft but clear, carrying through the sound of rain. "You look lonely. Do you need a wife?" The words hung in the air between them. The man blinked, caught off guard. He wasn't sure if she was joking, being cheeky, or simply too young to understand what she was saying. His lips moved as if he wanted to respond, but the words didn't come easily. The little girl didn't move. She tilted her head, her eyes wide and earnest, and added quietly, "And I need a dad." The words struck him like a lightning bolt. He felt a strange mix of shock, sadness, and something he couldn't quite name. He had spent years building a career, climbing the corporate ladder, and earning respect and money, but never had he felt such a direct, pure honesty from anyone, let alone a child. For a few seconds there was silence. The rain continued to fall, hitting the roof of the limo and the pavement around them, but it felt like time had stopped. He didn't know what to say. Most adults would have brushed her off, told her to go home, or simply ignored the comment. But there was something in her eyes, something raw and genuine, that made him pause. Finally, he managed a small smile. I'm not sure how to answer that," he said softly, his voice carrying a hint of both amusement and vulnerability. The little girl simply nodded as if she had expected no answer. She shifted on her feet, glancing at the wet street, but then looked back at him. "It's okay, I thought maybe you needed someone, like I need someone," she said, her tone almost shy now, but still full of honesty. He leaned back in his seat, unsure of what to do next. Normally he dealt with board meetings, business deals, and people who flattered him or challenged him. He was used to controlling conversations, to being the one with the power. But here, a little girl, drenched from the rain and speaking the truth of her heart, had him completely off balance. He found himself wanting to say something profound, to offer wisdom or comfort, but all he could do was listen. The little girl, sensing that her words had an effect, sat down on the curb, keeping her distance but still watching him. She didn't fidget or look around. She simply waited, as if she knew he would respond in time. The city around them carried on as usual. Cars honked, people shouted to be heard over the rain, and the occasional taxi splashed water onto the sidewalks. Yet in that moment, the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them, connected by something unspoken and powerful. After a few minutes, he leaned closer to the window. "Why do you say that?" he asked, genuinely curious. The girl shrugged, looking thoughtful. "Because my mom works a lot and she's always tired. I don't have a dad. I wanted to see if maybe you could be one," she said, her voice honest and without pretension. There was no manipulation, no hidden agenda, just the simple truth of a child's longing. He felt a lump in his throat. He had never thought much about family, or at least he had convinced himself that work was more important than relationships. He had made choices that left him wealthy but lonely. And yet, here was this little girl, challenging him with her honesty. making him confront parts of himself he had ignored for years. He wanted to say something reassuring, something that could make a difference, but he didn't know how to begin. "You're very brave to say that," he finally said. "Most kids wouldn't talk to someone like me. They would be scared or just run away." She smiled faintly, a small glimmer of pride in her expression. "I'm not scared, I just wanted to tell you," she said simply. Her words were so plain, so natural that they hit him even harder. She didn't ask for money, toys, or favors. She only spoke from her heart. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. He saw the determination in her eyes, the quiet strength in her posture, and the vulnerability that came with honesty. It was rare to meet someone like that, someone who could speak truth without expecting anything in return. For a moment he felt a connection that was unfamiliar but deeply comforting. The rain began to ease slightly, turning into a drizzle, and the little girl got to her feet. She adjusted her wet hair and backpack, ready to continue her walk home. He hesitated, unsure if he should let her go or ask her to stay. "Wait," he said, his voice firmer than before. She stopped and turned toward him. "Would you like to maybe sit and talk for a while?" he asked, careful not to sound too formal or intimidating. Her eyes widened slightly, then softened. "I can talk," she said simply, and so she did. She told him about her school, the friends she liked, the subjects she enjoyed, and the dreams she held close, some too big for her small world. He listened, occasionally asking questions, genuinely interested. He realized that he had been missing this kind of conversation in his life. Not shallow business talk, but real, honest dialogue. Hours could have passed, but only minutes had gone by. The city moved around them, oblivious to the bond forming between a little girl and a man who had spent most of his life building walls around himself. They shared small laughs, silent moments, and the kind of understanding that doesn't require words. Each was learning from the other in ways neither expected. Eventually, the rain stopped completely, leaving the streets wet and shiny, reflecting the fading light of the afternoon. The little girl looked at him seriously. "I have to go home now," she said. He nodded, though a part of him wished she didn't have to leave. He felt a strange emptiness at the thought of her walking away. "Will I see you again?" she asked, not as a demand but as a hopeful question. He smiled, realizing that she had given him something rare, a chance to care, to connect, to be human in a world that often demanded only success. "Yes," he said, "I think we will." Her face lit up and she waved before running toward her home, leaving small footprints in the wet pavement. As he watched her go, he reflected on the encounter. The day had started like any other, filled with meetings, schedules, and obligations, but it had turned into something completely unexpected. A little girl's honesty had cracked open the walls he had built around his heart. He realized that maybe, just maybe, life had a way of teaching the most important lessons in the simplest ways. He leaned back in his seat, staring at the empty street where she had disappeared. The world of boardrooms and business deals felt suddenly distant, and the importance of money, power, and success seemed smaller compared to the genuine connection he had just experienced. That quiet moment in the rain, with a little girl sitting on a curb, would stay with him forever, shaping his thoughts, his priorities, and perhaps even the path he would take in life from that day forward. The next morning, the little girl woke up to the sound of birds singing outside her small apartment window. The rain had stopped, leaving everything fresh and clean. She dressed quickly in her favorite outfit, a simple dress with bright colors that always made her feel cheerful. She grabbed her backpack, which was still damp from the previous day's rain, and headed out the door to school. Her mother was already in the kitchen preparing breakfast, tired but smiling at her daughter's energy. At school, the little girl could hardly focus. Her mind kept drifting back to the man in the limo, the stranger who had listened to her words without judgment. She wondered if he really would remember her, or if their conversation had been nothing more than a strange, fleeting moment. But deep inside she felt a spark of hope, the kind that only comes from unexpected kindness. Meanwhile, the CEO sat in his office, staring at the city below through the large glass windows. His mind kept replaying the little girl's words over and over. Her honesty had touched something in him that he hadn't felt in years. He thought about the emptiness he often carried, the loneliness that money and power could not fill. He realized that in all his years of business he had never truly connected with someone who mattered on a personal level. He hadn't known until now how much he had missed the simple human bond, the kind that a family could bring. Unable to shake the thought, he made a decision. He hired a driver to find the little girl's school. He didn't plan to interfere or make things complicated. He just wanted to see her again, to show that he was willing to care even in small ways. It wasn't about grand gestures or solving all problems, but about being there, being consistent, and slowly building trust. When the little girl left school that afternoon, the driver was waiting discreetly at a distance. She noticed him but didn't feel afraid. Instead, she felt a mix of curiosity and excitement. The CEO, observing from the back of his car, felt nervous too. He wasn't used to these moments outside the boardroom, outside contracts and meetings. He was venturing into unknown territory, one where his wealth and influence could not automatically solve things. This was about connection, care, and time, things he rarely spent and even more rarely gave. The CEO stepped out of the car and approached her slowly, keeping a safe distance to avoid startling her. "Hello again," he said gently. The little girl looked up, her eyes lighting up in recognition. "Hi," she said softly. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she felt a strange comfort in his presence. He crouched down slightly so that he was closer to her height, trying to make the interaction feel natural and safe. "I thought we could talk again if that's okay," he said. The little girl nodded. Her mother, who had followed at a distance and watched carefully, stepped forward. She was cautious, protective of her daughter, but she also sensed that he was sincere. There was no rush, no pressure, just a willingness to be present. Over the next few weeks, small routines began to form. He would pick the little girl up from school occasionally, taking her to a nearby park or a quiet cafe. They would sit and talk about her day, her dreams, her worries, and her little victories. He listened without judgment, asked questions, and sometimes just sat in silence with her, letting her words and thoughts fill the space. The little girl's world began to change subtly. She had always been independent and resilient, but now she felt seen and heard by someone who truly cared. She could ask questions freely, share her hopes without fear, and even laugh at small, silly things that brought them both joy. She loved hearing stories about his childhood, the mistakes he had made, and the lessons he had learned. He wasn't just a CEO to her. He was a person with experiences, emotions, and vulnerabilities. At the same time, he began to notice changes in himself. The little girl's innocence and straightforwardness reminded him of what really mattered. He started to understand that family, trust, and love were far more valuable than any business success. He began leaving work earlier, taking time to read with her, play games, or simply walk together. Slowly, he allowed himself to be vulnerable, sharing his fears and regrets, something he had not done in years. Her mother, initially skeptical, saw the positive changes in her daughter. She noticed how the little girl's confidence and happiness grew, how she began to approach the world with a sense of hope rather than worry. Gradually, she started to trust the CEO as well. She saw that he was consistent, patient, and genuinely interested in helping, not controlling. His presence brought stability and care, things she had longed for her daughter to experience. One afternoon, as they sat on a bench in the park, the little girl turned to him and said softly, "Thank you for listening to me. Most people don't really hear what I say." He smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that was new and comforting. "I'm glad you spoke to me," he replied. "You taught me something important too. Sometimes we forget to see the simple truths, the things that really matter." Over time, their bond deepened. They shared birthdays, school events, and small milestones together. The little girl learned about trust, friendship, and the quiet strength of having someone who cares. The CEO learned about patience, love, and the profound impact of being present in someone's life. Each day, their relationship became a source of joy and growth for both of them, a reminder that genuine connections could transform lives. Evenings at home became special. He would sit with them while her mother prepared dinner, listening to stories from school or helping with homework. Sometimes they played simple games, laughed at silly jokes, or went on small adventures around the neighborhood. The little girl's eyes would sparkle with excitement and trust, and he felt the kind of fulfillment that no boardroom meeting or business achievement had ever given him. The world outside their little bubble continued as usual. People hurried through the streets, caught up in their own lives, unaware of the quiet bond forming between a little girl and a man who had once felt entirely alone. But inside they had found something rare and precious. Trust, care, and the beginnings of a family built not by chance alone but by honesty, courage, and a willingness to be open. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. The little girl's laughter became a familiar sound in the CEO's life, a melody that reminded him of what truly mattered. He began to reflect on his priorities, making small but meaningful changes in how he lived and worked. He called less, rushed less, and noticed more. He began to value moments over money, presence over power, and connection over recognition. The little girl in turn grew more confident. She began speaking up in class, helping friends, and sharing her feelings more freely. She had someone to look up to, someone who believed in her and listened without judgment. She started to dream bigger, knowing that she had a steady source of support and love. One afternoon, as they walked together through the park, she looked up at him and said, "I think I like having you around. It feels safe." He felt a lump in his throat, overwhelmed by the simplicity and depth of her words. "I like being around you too," he replied. "You remind me of things I forgot I needed." By the end of part 2, the little girl and the CEO had developed a connection that went beyond words, built on trust, honesty, and shared experiences. Both were learning from each other, growing in ways they had never expected. Their bond, still new but strong, promised to continue shaping their lives, teaching them lessons about love, family, and the importance of being present. It was clear that this was only the beginning of a story that would change them both forever. Days passed, and the bond between the little girl and the CEO continued to grow stronger. The city moved around them, busy and indifferent, but they had created their own small world where trust and care flourished. Every afternoon after school, she would wait by the corner near her home, knowing he might come. Sometimes he did, sometimes not, and she had learned to accept both with grace. But when he arrived, her face lit up, and the connection they shared seemed to brighten the gray streets. One rainy afternoon, similar to the day they first met, he arrived unexpectedly. She was standing under a small awning, her backpack soaked and hair plastered to her cheeks. She glanced at the black car, her small hand gripping the strap of her bag, uncertain yet hopeful. When he stepped out and offered a warm smile, she ran toward him without hesitation. His suit was damp, but he didn't mind. All that mattered was this small moment, a pause from the world around them. "Hello again," he said gently. "Do you want to get out of the rain for a while?" She nodded eagerly. They drove to a quiet park he often visited alone, a place with benches under large trees and a small pond where ducks wandered. It was secluded enough to feel private, but welcoming enough to feel safe. The rain had stopped by the time they arrived, leaving puddles that reflected the cloudy sky. As they walked, he noticed how careful she was with each step, avoiding the wet patches. "You're always so careful," he said. She looked up at him and shrugged. "I have to be," she said simply. "The world is slippery sometimes, and you have to watch your steps." His heart tightened at her words. There was wisdom in her innocence, a clarity that often eluded adults. He realized that life had been too serious for him, weighed down by schedules and responsibilities, and yet, here was a child navigating it all with resilience and hope. They found a bench near the pond and sat quietly, watching the ducks glide across the water. The little girl kicked a small pebble, sending ripples across the puddles. She turned to him and said, "Do you ever get lonely?" He paused, considering his words carefully. "Yes," he admitted softly. "Even when I'm busy, even when I'm surrounded by people, sometimes I feel very lonely." She nodded as if she had expected that answer. "I know that feeling too," she said. "Sometimes I feel like no one really sees me." He reached over and gently touched her hand, a small gesture of comfort and connection. "I see you," he said, "and I want to be someone you can trust, someone who will listen no matter what." She looked at him, her eyes wide and reflective, and then smiled faintly. It was the kind of smile that carried relief and trust, the beginning of a bond that ran deeper than words. Over the next few weeks, he began to take more initiative in her life. He spoke with her mother, carefully and respectfully, offering help where it was needed. He didn't want to overstep, but he wanted to show that he was serious about being a steady presence. He helped with school supplies, arranged tutoring for subjects she struggled with, and even found time to attend her school events. Each action was small but meaningful, building trust slowly and genuinely. The little girl noticed the changes and began to share more of her thoughts with him. She spoke about her dreams, her fears, and even the little frustrations that made her feel powerless. He listened, never interrupting, never offering unsolicited advice. Sometimes he asked questions, guiding her gently to think for herself. Their conversations were honest, open, and sometimes surprisingly deep. He learned to see the world through her eyes, understanding her perspective in ways he had never considered. One afternoon they went to a small library tucked away in a quiet street. She loved books and he enjoyed watching her immerse herself in stories. He sat beside her, flipping through a magazine quietly, content to simply be present. She leaned against him, pointing out illustrations and sharing snippets of the story she was reading. He realized that these small, ordinary moments were becoming the most important parts of his life. It wasn't the board meetings, contracts, or financial reports that mattered most. It was this, the simplicity of connection, the trust and joy they shared. The little girl's mother gradually became more comfortable with his presence. She saw the patience and care he offered, the genuine concern he showed for her daughter. She noticed how her child's confidence and happiness grew when he was around. Slowly, she allowed him to be part of their lives, not as an outsider, but as a trusted friend, someone who could support them both. Evenings became times of laughter and learning. They cooked simple meals together, played board games, and shared stories about their days. The CEO found himself teaching life lessons subtly, using small, relatable examples rather than lectures. The little girl absorbed these lessons, her eyes bright with understanding and curiosity. She learned not just about academics or rules, but about kindness, patience, and the quiet strength of being there for someone else. On one particular evening, the little girl asked him about his past. She wanted to understand why he was so different from other adults she had met. He hesitated, then spoke honestly. He told her about his childhood, the loneliness he had felt, the mistakes he had made, and the lessons he had learned too late. She listened intently, asking questions and reflecting on his words. He realized that sharing his story with her was healing in its own way. He had never allowed himself to be vulnerable with anyone in such a straightforward way. Weeks turned into months, and their bond deepened. They became a team of sorts, navigating life's small challenges together. He supported her in school projects, cheered her on during performances, and even helped her with personal challenges like making friends or expressing herself. In return, she taught him patience, joy, and simplicity, and the power of honesty. Their relationship was evolving naturally, built on trust, consistency, and genuine care. One afternoon, as they walked home from school, the little girl stopped and looked up at him. "I like having you around," she said softly. "It feels safe." He felt a lump in his throat, overwhelmed by the simplicity and depth of her words. "I like being around you too," he replied, squeezing her hand gently. He realized that he had been missing this kind of connection for a long time, and it was more fulfilling than any achievement he had pursued. The little girl began to introduce him to her friends at school as someone important in her life. They noticed the difference in her confidence, the spark in her eyes, and the happiness that radiated from her. She shared stories of their time together, from library visits to park walks, and her peers began to see the CEO not as a stranger but as a trusted figure in her life. Her mother, too, embraced the changes. She saw how her daughter's world had expanded, how she had grown emotionally and socially. The CEO's presence became a steady force in their household, not intrusive but supportive, allowing them to thrive. Even in the midst of his busy career, he found himself thinking differently about priorities. Meetings, deadlines, and profit still mattered, but not as much as being there for the little girl and her mother. He started making deliberate choices to balance work and life, carving out time for family, presence, and care. The little girl's quiet, honest words had shifted his perspective, showing him the value of connection over control, love over power. By the end of part 3, the CEO and the little girl had established a bond that was unshakable. It was a bond built on honesty, trust, and shared experiences. Both were learning from each other. He about patience, love, and the importance of presence, and she about trust, courage, and the quiet strength of being supported. Their lives were intertwined, slowly transforming both their worlds, creating a foundation for the family they were beginning to become. The story was far from over, but it was clear that the moments they shared would leave a lasting impact on both their hearts. The little girl had begun to expect his presence after school, and each meeting became a highlight of her day. Their walks, small adventures, and conversations were moments that brought a sense of stability and joy to her life. She started opening up more, sharing her thoughts about school, her friends, and the dreams she kept close to her heart. He listened attentively, learning to understand the world from her perspective. He had never realized how much wisdom a child could carry, even in the simplest statements. One afternoon, they decided to visit a small art gallery downtown. The CEO wanted to expose her to experiences outside her daily routine, to nurture her curiosity and imagination. As they walked through the quiet halls filled with paintings and sculptures, she paused frequently, her eyes wide with wonder. She asked questions about the colors, the shapes, and the emotions that the art seemed to express. He answered her carefully, explaining not only the technical aspects but also encouraging her to explore what she felt. It was a gentle lesson in observation, creativity, and self-expression. In turn, she began to teach him about her world. She described her teachers, classmates, and the small joys that made her day special. She shared her struggles too, the moments she felt insecure, misunderstood, or left out. He listened, realizing that these simple confessions held deep emotional truth. Her words reminded him of what mattered most in life: empathy, understanding, and genuine presence. Back at home, her mother had begun to notice the changes in both of them. The little girl was happier, more confident, and seemed to radiate a sense of security. She was more willing to express herself and to trust adults around her. Her mother could see the CEO's influence was positive, steady, and nurturing. She no longer felt the fear of someone intruding into their lives. Instead, she felt gratitude that her daughter had someone reliable to lean on. One evening, they all sat together at the dinner table, sharing a meal and stories about their day. The CEO had learned to participate in this domestic routine with ease, helping to set the table, asking the little girl about her schoolwork, and genuinely listening to her mother's concerns. The atmosphere was warm, filled with laughter, gentle teasing, and a sense of belonging. It was not perfect, but it was authentic, and that authenticity was what mattered most. Outside their home, the world continued its usual pace. The city streets bustled with activity, but inside, they had carved out a small sanctuary of trust and connection. Their shared experiences were teaching them lessons that money and power could not provide. He was learning the importance of patience, empathy, and showing up consistently. The little girl was learning about trust, courage, and the value of having someone who would always be there for her. One weekend, they took a trip to a nearby botanical garden. The CEO wanted to give her a sense of wonder, to help her see the beauty in small things. They wandered through paths lined with flowers, watched butterflies dance in the sunlight, and listened to birds chirping in the trees. She asked countless questions about the plants, the insects, and the world around them. He answered thoughtfully, encouraging her curiosity. It was a shared adventure, an opportunity to bond through discovery and shared experiences. The little girl began to ask more personal questions as well. She wanted to understand why he had been alone for so long, why he seemed different from other adults she knew. He answered honestly, sharing stories of his past mistakes, the regrets he carried, and the lessons he had learned too late. She listened attentively, never judging, only absorbing the lessons in her own quiet way. Through these conversations, he began to trust her with his emotions, realizing that she could handle honesty, vulnerability, and depth even at her young age. They also spent time in smaller, everyday moments. Cooking together, reading bedtime stories, and playing simple games became rituals that strengthened their bond. He began to recognize that these moments were far more meaningful than any grand gesture or expensive gift. The consistency of his presence, the genuine care he showed, and the attention he paid to her thoughts and feelings mattered far more than anything else he could offer. The little girl's mother became an active participant in these moments as well. She saw the positive impact of having someone supportive and consistent around. Her daughter was thriving, and the CEO had become a reliable presence she could trust. Their household dynamic began to change slowly but noticeably. The warmth and laughter replaced the constant tension and exhaustion that had once defined their lives. As the months went by, the CEO began to reflect deeply on his priorities. He realized that the little girl's honesty and courage had transformed his understanding of life. He started leaving work earlier, attending school events, and being present in moments that truly mattered. He had begun to balance his responsibilities with his desire to nurture genuine connections, something he had long neglected. One evening, as they walked together through the quiet streets after a school event, the little girl turned to him and said softly, "I like having you around. It feels safe." He felt a lump in his throat, overwhelmed by the simplicity and truth of her words. "I like being around you too," he replied, squeezing her hand gently. In that moment, he understood that the bond they shared was not just about guidance or support. It was about mutual growth, trust, and genuine care. The little girl began to include him in her daily life more confidently. She introduced him to her friends as someone important, and they noticed the difference in her demeanor. She was more confident, articulate, and willing to engage with the world. Her mother noticed the same, recognizing that the CEO's presence was shaping her daughter's development positively, fostering both emotional resilience and social confidence. Even the CEO's work life began to shift. He approached business with a renewed perspective, understanding that success was not just about profit or recognition, but about impact, relationships, and the way he spent his time. The little girl's simple honesty had given him a clarity that he had never experienced in boardrooms filled with discussion and negotiation. He had learned that the small, genuine moments mattered more than any calculated strategy or financial gain. Over time, their bond became a source of strength for both of them. The little girl had a stable, caring presence in her life, someone who listened, guided, and supported her without judgment. The CEO had found a purpose beyond his work, a reason to nurture, love, and connect. Together, they were building a foundation of trust, mutual respect, and genuine affection that would shape their futures. By the end of Part 4, their relationship had evolved into something deeply meaningful. They shared not just moments but lessons, not just presence but emotional growth. The little girl and the CEO were learning from each other in ways that were profound, life-changing, and deeply human. The simple act of showing up, listening, and caring had transformed both their worlds, creating a bond that promised to last, guiding them through challenges, joys, and the journey of life together. Time had passed since the little girl first spoke to the CEO in the rain, and their bond had grown into something profound. Every day brought new experiences, lessons, and moments that strengthened their connection. The city outside continued its hurried pace, but inside their world there was patience, trust, and love. The little girl felt safe, confident, and cared for in a way she had never experienced before. The CEO, in turn, found purpose, fulfillment, and a sense of family he had long believed was beyond his reach. One sunny afternoon, they decided to take a trip to a nearby park that was known for its beautiful walking trails and quiet spots. The little girl skipped ahead, her laughter echoing among the trees. He followed at a slower pace, watching her with a warm smile. The joy on her face reminded him of the importance of small, simple moments. It wasn't about lavish trips or expensive gifts. It was about being present, paying attention, and sharing time together. As they walked along the path, the little girl stopped to watch a squirrel scamper across the grass. She pointed excitedly and asked questions about the animal, its behavior, and the trees around them. He answered patiently, sometimes asking her questions in return, encouraging her to think and explore the world with curiosity. She loved these exchanges, feeling like her thoughts and ideas mattered. She knew she could speak freely and he would always listen. They found a bench near a small pond and sat down. The little girl tossed pebbles into the water, watching the ripples spread outward. "Do you think the ripples ever stop?" she asked quietly. He looked at her and smiled, realizing the depth behind her simple question. "Ripples may fade, but the impact they create stays with the water and the world around it," he said gently. She thought about it, nodding, and a small smile spread across her face. She understood that even small actions could create lasting effects. The CEO noticed how much she had grown over the months. Her confidence had blossomed, her curiosity had expanded, and her sense of security was evident in every movement. She had learned to trust, to express herself, and to navigate her emotions with guidance and care. He felt proud of her, not as an accomplishment to boast about, but as a reflection of the bond they had nurtured together. After the park visit, they returned home, where the little girl's mother was preparing dinner. The atmosphere was warm, filled with laughter, conversation, and a sense of togetherness that had once been missing. They shared stories of their day, small victories, and even minor frustrations. Each member of the household contributed, learning to communicate, listen, and support one another. The CEO had become an integral part of their family life, not as an outsider, but as someone trusted and loved. Evenings were often spent together, reading stories, helping with homework, or engaging in small projects. The little girl loved to draw, and he encouraged her creativity, asking her to explain her artwork and the thoughts behind it. These moments allowed him to see the world through her eyes, to understand the innocence, wonder, and honesty that defined her perspective. In return, he shared lessons from his life in ways that were simple, relatable, and meaningful. He taught her about patience, responsibility, and empathy, not through lectures, but through actions, conversations, and consistent presence. Over time, the little girl became more confident in her interactions with peers and adults. She shared stories about her time with him, the lessons she had learned, and the moments that had made her feel supported. Her friends noticed the change in her demeanor, the spark in her eyes, and the joy in her laughter. She had grown emotionally, socially, and mentally, thanks to the nurturing environment created by both her mother and the CEO. The CEO himself had undergone a transformation. The little girl's honesty, courage, and openness had taught him to slow down, reflect, and value human connections over material success. He had started balancing work and personal life, leaving meetings to attend school events, setting aside time for family, and participating actively in the daily routines of the household. The joy and fulfillment he derived from these moments far surpassed any accomplishment he had achieved in the corporate world. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, the little girl looked up at him and said softly, "I'm glad you are my dad now, even if not by blood." He felt a lump in his throat, touched by the depth of her words. "I'm glad too," he replied, his voice steady but filled with emotion. He realized that family was not defined by blood alone, but by care, presence, and trust. Her acceptance of him as a father figure had solidified the bond they had built, creating a sense of belonging and love that was mutual and profound. They continued to create memories together, from weekend outings to quiet nights at home. They celebrated birthdays, school achievements, and even small personal victories. The little girl learned to navigate challenges with resilience, knowing she had someone to support her unconditionally. The CEO found joy in mentoring, guiding, and nurturing, understanding that these moments were shaping not only her life but also his own. Her mother watched their bond with gratitude and relief. She saw her daughter's happiness, the emotional growth, and the stability that had become a part of their daily lives. She recognized the CEO's dedication, patience, and genuine care, and she trusted him implicitly. Their household dynamic had evolved into one of harmony, support, and mutual respect. The little girl thrived in this environment, knowing she was loved, heard, and understood. Over the months, the CEO's approach to life had shifted. He valued presence over possessions, relationships over recognition, and authenticity over appearances. He had learned that true fulfillment came from meaningful connections, shared experiences, and the impact he could have on those around him. The little girl had unknowingly guided him toward this understanding, her honesty and courage acting as catalysts for his transformation. As the story reached its conclusion, the little girl and the CEO had formed a family in the truest sense of the word. Their bond was built on trust, love, and shared experiences, a foundation that would support them through challenges, joys, and the journey of life. They had created a sanctuary within the bustling city, a place where care, presence, and understanding were paramount. The little girl, once lonely and uncertain, had found a father figure who listened, guided, and supported her unconditionally. The CEO, once isolated by work and ambition, had discovered the profound fulfillment of connection, mentorship, and love. Together they had transformed each other's lives, demonstrating that the power of honesty, courage, and presence could overcome loneliness, fear, and uncertainty. In a final, quiet moment, the little girl drew a picture of their family. She included herself, her mother, and the CEO, labeling it, "My dad and my hero." When she showed it to him, he felt a surge of emotion. The picture was simple, yet it captured the depth of their bond, the love they shared, and the journey they had undertaken together. He hugged her tightly, understanding that this small, honest act of a child's love had changed his life forever. From that day forward, their lives continued with laughter, growth, and shared experiences. They faced challenges together, celebrated victories together, and learned from each other every day. The little girl had found the father she needed, the CEO had found the family he longed for, and together they had created a life filled with love, trust, and unwavering support. Their story was a testament to the transformative power of human connection, honesty, and the simple act of showing up for one another. It was a story that would stay with them forever, shaping their hearts and guiding their lives with warmth and care. Time continued to move forward, and the bond between the little girl and the CEO only grew stronger. Their lives had settled into a comforting rhythm, filled with shared experiences, laughter, learning, and moments of quiet reflection. The city around them remained busy and chaotic, but within their little world there was consistency, trust, and love. Every day brought a chance to deepen their connection and explore new ways to grow together. The little girl's school life had blossomed. She was more confident, attentive, and willing to take risks in her learning. She began participating in school events with enthusiasm, sharing her accomplishments with the CEO and her mother. He attended as many events as possible, sometimes sitting quietly in the back, sometimes cheering from the sidelines. Each time he was there, the little girl felt seen and supported. His presence was a reminder that someone genuinely cared, someone she could rely on no matter what. On weekends, they began planning small outings that were both educational and fun. They visited museums, science centers, and historical sites, using each visit as an opportunity to explore, ask questions, and learn together. The CEO encouraged her curiosity, asking open-ended questions and allowing her to express her thoughts without judgment. He learned to see the world from her perspective, noticing details and ideas he had never considered before. Their conversations grew deeper, touching on subjects like dreams, fears, hopes, and even the meaning of family. One sunny morning, they decided to take a trip to the countryside. The little girl had never been to such an open space before, and her excitement was contagious. As they walked through fields, watched birds soar, and listened to the wind rustling through the trees, she asked countless questions. He answered patiently, sometimes pausing to let her think, reflect, and imagine. She laughed freely, running ahead and then coming back to show him something she had discovered, a flower, a bug, or a unique stone. The simple joy in these moments reminded him of the beauty in everyday life, something he had often overlooked while pursuing success. Back at home, the little girl's mother continued to notice the positive changes in both her daughter and the CEO. The household had transformed from one filled with routine struggles and stress to one brimming with warmth, cooperation, and genuine care. Meals were shared with laughter, homework sessions were approached with patience, and evenings were spent in storytelling, creativity, or quiet companionship. The CEO had become a constant presence, and his influence on their lives was evident in every small, meaningful interaction. The little girl began to understand the concept of family in new ways. She realized that love and care were not always bound by blood but by trust, consistency, and emotional presence. The CEO had become her father figure in every sense that mattered. She felt secure enough to express her feelings, ask questions about the world, and seek guidance without fear. This freedom of expression allowed her to grow emotionally, intellectually, and socially. One evening, they sat together in the living room reflecting on their journey. The little girl asked, "Do you think families always have to be together by blood to be real families?" He smiled softly, taking her small hand in his. "No," he replied. "Families are built on love, trust, and care. You don't need to be related by blood to be a real family. We are a family because we care for each other and support each other." She looked thoughtful, then smiled, understanding the truth in his words. That night she felt a deeper sense of belonging than ever before. Their bond continued to be strengthened through shared responsibilities and small acts of care. The CEO helped her with school projects, encouraged her hobbies, and listened to her stories without distraction. He taught her about resilience, problem-solving, and the importance of being kind to oneself and others. She, in turn, reminded him of the joy in simplicity, the value of honesty, and the power of patience. Each learned from the other, growing together in ways that were both subtle and profound. Over time, the CEO became more comfortable in his role not just as a mentor, but as a parent figure. He realized that being a father was not about grand gestures or authority, but about showing up consistently, listening with empathy, and nurturing with love. He began planning activities that allowed them to bond, such as cooking meals together, building small projects, or simply spending time reading and talking. The little girl appreciated these moments deeply, knowing she had someone to rely on unconditionally. Their evenings often included storytelling, where the CEO shared lessons from his life, carefully chosen to be appropriate for her age but meaningful enough to inspire reflection. The little girl would ask questions, sometimes probing deeply, sometimes out of pure curiosity. Their discussions ranged from the importance of honesty to the value of friendship, patience, and perseverance. Through these conversations, the CEO realized he had been learning as much from her as she had from him. One day, the little girl expressed a desire to help others. She wanted to volunteer, to share her time and kindness with children who might not have the support she had. The CEO encouraged this initiative, helping her find local programs and guiding her in small, meaningful ways to make a difference. She became increasingly aware of the impact one person could have, and her confidence and sense of purpose grew. As they continued to build their life together, challenges arose, as they always do. There were misunderstandings, moments of frustration, and times when life's pressures seemed overwhelming. But through it all, their bond remained strong. They learned to communicate openly, resolve conflicts calmly, and approach problems with patience and empathy. Each challenge strengthened their relationship, proving that the foundation they had built was resilient and enduring. School milestones were celebrated with care and enthusiasm. From her first awards to performances and projects, the CEO was there, offering support and encouragement. The little girl felt proud, knowing she had someone to celebrate her successes and comfort her in moments of disappointment. She learned the value of perseverance and resilience, understanding that both achievements and setbacks were part of growth. The CEO's career also began to reflect his personal growth. He approached business with renewed perspective, balancing ambition with compassion, decision-making with empathy, and strategy with human connection. Colleagues noticed the change, remarking on his calmer demeanor and thoughtful approach. He realized that his success was more meaningful when he could integrate his personal values and the lessons he had learned from his new family into his professional life. Evenings at home remained special. They spent time creating art, writing stories, and engaging in playful activities that fostered creativity and imagination. The little girl's mother observed these moments with gratitude, understanding that the CEO had become a stabilizing and loving presence. Their household had transformed into a space where care, attention, and affection were constant, nurturing both the little girl and the adults around her. One rainy evening, much like the first day they had met, they sat together by the window, listening to the rain fall. The little girl spoke softly. "I never thought someone could really care like this, just show up and stay." The CEO smiled, feeling the depth of her words. "I'm glad I could be here for you," he replied. "You've also shown me what it means to truly care and be present." They shared a quiet moment, reflecting on how far they had come, the lessons they had learned, and the trust and love that had grown between them. Their relationship had become a guiding force in both their lives. The little girl's innocence, honesty, and courage had transformed the CEO, teaching him patience, empathy, and the value of consistent presence. He had become more than a mentor. He had become a father figure, a trusted confidant, and a source of love and guidance. Together, they had navigated life's complexities, growing stronger, wiser, and more compassionate.